Welcome, everybody, to episode 18 of Recovery Machine. We're here with Shaldun Wilson, who happens to be a really good friend of mine. We met, if you remember, back in episode 1. I told us a story about a guy who told me that I was heading down the wrong path, asking too many questions in rehab, and I was going to get kicked out. This is the gentleman right there. How you doing, Shaldun?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me out.
Well, thanks for doing this. As always, joined by my co-host, Corey. How are you doing today, Corey?
Good morning. Yeah, I'm doing really well, Nathan. Good to see you again, Sheldon. I'm looking forward to this episode. It's such an important story to tell. I'm really looking forward to this one because it's we're providing a bit of a different angle than we have in the past, and I think providing this angle will fill in a lot for people who are listening.
Yeah. Hopefully, I don't disappoint. I have no training, just opinions. I don't do a lot of research. I just have my own opinions and experiences to go off of. So,
well, I think the way those opinions are put forth is with such confidence that your training really just doesn't matter in your in your rare circumstance. But that's a lie, because I know you know some stuff. So yeah, I think this, like you said, Corey, this is probably one of the more important ones we do, just to show people a different kind of route that you can go, and that I think the more angles we take on this, and it can be really frustrating when you're in that. We were just discussing what it's like to be in that first year, when you've been sent to treatment and your head's spinning, you're at home, you don't know what's going on, you're being told a lot of strange things. Having direction and being able to still have faith in yourself at that time is very important. And the other thing is to remember, like you were saying the other day, Sheldon, there's always other options. You don't have to do what, there's an emphasis on going back to work. We know that regardless of your circumstances, there seems to be a push, and they want to, generally you're requested to go back to work, and you're guided in that direction, but it's not always necessary, and I don't think it's always the safest way. So for this little segment, we're going to get Corey's going to ask the majority of the questions, and so we'll just go over your history a little bit, and then we're going to focus mostly on what you're doing now, what's working for you, and how you got to where you are now. So yeah, if you're okay with that, Sheldon, we'll get going.
Yeah, let's get her started.
All right.
Cool. So Sheldon, we want to just provide a little bit of context about where you're at now. Geographically, where are you in Canada, and what keeps you busy? What are you doing out there?
I live in Southern Ontario, basically Hamilton, in that general area. I sell real estate. I have a pretty good business. Have 2 sales agents under our banner, 2 administrative staff, and a staging side business with staff there. And have a family that's much more important to me. 3 beautiful children, beautiful partner, and try and take care of myself. That's what we're up to.
Yeah. How old's the kids?
They are now 3.5, 6, and 8. And, time flies. Time flies.
Yeah.
You're a busy guy.
Too busy, probably, to be very honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And somehow you're also trying to do a little bit of fitness stuff. And you've got kind of a regimen going there. I know you were saying you're having some trouble this week with discipline and timing and stuff like that, but to do everything that you're doing and then being able to commit to any kind of fitness on top, that's pretty impressive. You got more energy than I do.
Well, and we'll get into that a little more. I really think that it is the fitness regimen and the self-care and the self-love and taking time to make that the highest priority and really understanding that. I mean, you hear it said, and hundreds of times, you've got to put on your own oxygen mask before somebody else's, but very few people do.
Yeah.
And I don't know, again, if it's a trait or a tendency of people with our issues, but very rarely in my life have I ever said, like, no, this is important to me. I'm doing this, and this is number one. And by doing this number one thing, everything else is falling in line so much better.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible, and I'm excited to share that, and I'm really grateful for the people in my life that have pushed me to do that. And how I try and pay it forward is by encouraging others to do the same thing. You must put yourself first, whatever that means for you. You just have to.
Yeah. I think it is a trait. It's one that I've seen sort of resistance from some folks about, or like to kind of like make that connection where they really buy into that and see that the other things do come into place, and that it's not actually selfishness, that self-care and that, you know, prioritizing your own the things that are going to keep you grounded, that's not about being selfish, that it's actually, you have more to give to the other people in your world if you do that.
Oh, I couldn't say it better.
So Sheldon, let's go back a little bit. We want to talk about your history in healthcare, and we'll get to some of the big changes that you've made, the pivots. But you were a practical nurse, and in Ontario it's called a registered practical nurse. Out here in BC it's a licensed practical nurse. So can you take us through how you got into healthcare and what that looked like when you were working as a nurse?
Yeah, so I was in Edmonton. I was in university. I had a head injury and took a year off of university. Going back to university didn't really make sense at the time. So I was encouraged to get into the nursing field. I kind of wanted, like, really enjoyed medicine and anatomy stuff. And so I got my practical nursing diploma out in Edmonton, and I got one of the best jobs I think any practical nurse in Alberta could have had. I was on a pediatric cardiology ward, high level acuity, dealing with, you know, very, very cutting edge healthcare. And I mean, I had a great experience there overall, no issues whatsoever. And then moved on to get my registered nurse in Ontario, and moved to Hamilton with my partner at the time, who was also a registered nurse. And I started my nursing degree in Ontario, started working as a surgical trauma practical nurse, and that went fine. I mean, it was a very, very different experience from working in pediatrics. Still, you know, I took a lot of pride in being a great nurse, and I say that a little tongue in cheek because everybody always says they're a great nurse, and you're sitting there and you're like, no, you're not. You're talking to people and you're like, no, you really aren't a good nurse. But I had the support of the other really good nurses around me. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. The really good people tend to stick together, and they were, you know, if they needed you, I would get pulled into a higher acuity area. I would give higher acuity assignments. It was very, you know, I felt very lucky and very appreciated, I guess.
Well, that's a testament to you, Sheldon. I mean, and just to be clear, you and I we've never, our nursing paths have never crossed, but that's kind of an unusual set of roles for a practical nurse to be in, and it's a testament to the quality of a nurse you were, that you were given those responsibilities. Those are not typical practical nurse settings, so you were clearly a very, very competent and qualified to be in those areas.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I would agree. I mean, getting into the weeds a little bit, the practical nurse 2-year diploma had just come out that time, and they were just allowing practical nurses in those acute care settings, and our scope of practice was increasing at a dramatic pace, with a lot of discomfort and pushback from the RNs sometimes. So that made for a very uncomfortable work environment sometimes. But again, like it was good to know that you were doing well. So.
And what year was that, Sheldon?
Oh, that's tough. Maybe 2007-ish.
Okay. Just before the Great Recession.
Yeah.
How did you find the work in terms of, working in a trauma setting, working with very sick children? What was that like for you? What was the impact on that for you emotionally and spiritually? That's heavy work.
It is really heavy work. And I think it's interesting because I found a lot of nurses, including myself, just desensitize and shut it off. So it didn't really impact me that much. There were a couple of things that will always stick out in my mind, doing compressions on an 8-year-old who's turning blue and then black, and we saved his life. But that doesn't go away. We had, seeing some stuff with seizure behavior, infant death. Those things are tough. When I got into adults, putting people in body bags, some of those things still stick with you.
Yeah.
And some of the really sad stories. I don't know if there was too many tasks. I mean, I've had my hands in people's abdomens. I've had kind of horrible tasks to perform. That stuff didn't stick with me, but maybe a 55-year-old father of 2 that came in with a sore back. He thought he hurt himself carrying a canoe, and found out he had bone cancer and passed away in 3 weeks. Like that stuff will never, like, you just can't shake it.
Yeah.
Right. I can go on with those kind of stories. I want to, confidentiality and whatever. I don't want to say too many things with things, but that stuff is really hard.
Yeah, same. Those are things that don't leave. For me, I've been able to kind of work through some of them, and they look a little bit different in my mind than they did immediately after. But yeah, they change the fabric of who we are, I think.
I would agree. And it's one of those, like, at a very slow pace and a very, I don't know what the right words are, right? Like, it happens without your knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. And you just look up one day and you're like, how are you so cold? Right. I can maybe I'll share a story. I don't know if it'll work or not, but my ex ICU nurse, they had again, without getting into too many details, little child was not going to survive. And the majority of the nurses in the ICU were like, why won't the family pull the plug on this kid? And they were really frustrated with the family, and they were really cold and really, really brutal. And they were at my house kind of talking about this, like a bunch of, nurses talking about how they should just do these things, and this family's unreasonable. And I got up and I got really angry, and I was like, do you hear yourselves? That this family who had a deep religious belief has a child that looks perfectly healthy laying there, and you don't have the compassion to understand what it takes for them to pull the plug on that kid? What's wrong with you? Like, seriously, what's wrong with all of you? And I walked out and slammed the door. And but I was a little bit removed from my nursing at that point, just a little bit, but enough to know, like, that's an insane conversation.
Did you notice that too, Corey? Kind of like the frog in the slowly increasing temperature pot of water type situation, where you're kind of getting colder and you're not noticing it, or you're building up some sort of, obviously human beings got to put up some kind of walls to what you're seeing on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I remember when I, within the first couple of years of being an ER nurse, having some incidents that were really heavy and it impacted me, and where I really felt them. But then when I think that, again, that gradual increase in temperature, fast forward a few years, and like I knew that things were hitting me hard, but I couldn't force out a tear or like force myself to feel it in the same way that I would have a couple of years prior. and that wasn't me. Like that was the thing. It was like I was quite a sensitive person, but like things that should have been felt more fully, I was quite cold and callous to. And I think that's just our brain's way of protecting us too, that like as we see these things repeatedly, if we absorbed all of them and felt all of them in their fullness, we would break, or we would, well, and as we will get to, like we find a way around that, I think. So maybe that's a segue there, Shaldun. So can you tell us how your path in nursing then led you towards opiate use?
So, I had dabbled in substances, and it's actually an interesting. It's an interesting story. You're right. Let's just stick with the nursing component. The short story is that I play rugby, play fairly high level at one time. I tore my MCL and did some damage to my knee. Called in sick for the shift, that night and probably the next 2 nights. By Monday, I was fitted for a knee immobilizing brace, and by Wednesday, I was back in at work in absolute agony and loaded up on Percocet. I'm sure that if I had said I wanted some time off, I could have taken it. I was on like a full-time, part-time schedule. So I wouldn't have had any income if I did take time off. So I just worked through the pain and discomfort, which was nothing new for me. I mean, I was a hockey player, a rugby player, athlete, work in pain. It wasn't a big issue. I had to figure out how to bend because I couldn't bend my knee. But it just was what it was. So it was a really logical kind of process for me. The Percocets cost a lot of money. I had prescriptions, good large volume prescriptions. I was in a lot of pain. I'm a big guy. But hospital wastage is free. And doing subcutaneous injections, when you're doing subcutaneous injections 20, 30 times a shift for years on end, you're completely desensitized to a needle like that.
Yeah.
I know that people outside are like, you use needles? I'm like, I use needles every day.
Yeah.
Dozens and dozens of times a day. So it's that environment that just says, well, this is not a scary thing. And it's a nice little clear liquid. It's just water. It's benign. It's nothing. It should probably be in like a evil villain movie where it's like neon green or something, or bright red. Like, this is scary shit. So I started injecting subcutaneous Dilaudid and morphine. The morphine made me itchy, so I just stayed with the Dilaudid. And I was shocked at how well that worked to manage my pain in very small quantities, 2-3 times on a 12-hour shift. I probably wasn't even taking the Percocet when I was at work because the Dilaudid was working extremely effectively to manage my pain.
That's a really interesting point that we haven't kind of looked at before, is how you're kind of being induced to normalizing needle use in that environment. I've never considered that before, and it is something that's crossed my mind a few times. Like, how is it that so many nurses, I mean, for all intents and purposes, they look like upstanding citizens, and it so easily go down that route, when for me, that I think that would have taken a little more. I would have had to been in kind of deeper waters to get me to cross over to that. And it's got to be because you're just so damn used to using the things.
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's environment, and what you do on a consistent basis is what determines who you are, what you're about, what you believe. It's not what you do once in a while. It's what you do on a regular basis.
Yes.
So if you're consistently interacting with needles, then it makes sense, right?
It really does. Yeah.
You think about smoking. How insane is it to put a stick of weeds in your mouth and light that on fire and inhale the smoke? Like that doesn't make any sense. But if you're around that kind of stuff and it's normalized, then you do it. But it's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no,
so yeah.
like you think about it, like just to provide some context for people. I mean, at least for myself, I think when I was working in the ER on a 12-hour shift, say, like it wouldn't be unusual to give other people between maybe 25 and 40 needles a day,
Easily.
or more.
And
so it's that normal.
Right.
and your
right.
needles you're using needles to fill up saline bags, mini med bags, and you're giving heparin injections. Like it's all, I mean, it's just desensitized in that environment.
Yeah.
So that's where it started. And then I was in the middle of that summer, I was in the middle of doing a major home renovation. I had just separated from my partner in a very ugly relationship. And I was at an emotional low. I was at a financial low, and I just kept working through the pain. And I needed to get this renovation done because we had bought the house together, and we needed to sell the house to separate our lives. And so, well, Dilaudid works well at work at the hospital to get me through the day. And I've got this big renovation to do with a knee brace on. Well, I'll just use Dilaudid at home. Well, then September rolled around and I still had the renovation to do, and I was still working at the hospital, and I was still pretty low in my emotional level. Well, Dilaudid keeps me up and I can study. So now I'm studying full time. I'm working full time, almost straight nights. I can stay up for 36, 48 hours without any real issue. And my partner is like, well, hey, I love this production you're getting, and you're getting the house renovation done. And we had gotten back together, which was an interesting conclusion or decision. But so here I am, and it's like September, October, and I'm using Dilaudid daily, certainly, probably maybe 3 or 4 injections a day, 1 to 2 milligrams, very on pace with what would be a safe, healthy dosage, and maintaining an extremely productive life. Top marks at school, top getting tons done around the house, and everything's going tickety boo at work. Everybody's happy except me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Except me. And I knew I was starting to get in trouble.
So it brings you back up. I mean, there's a common thread between the three of us, and certainly in many other people that I think all three of us have talked to, that it for that honeymoon period, even if you're unhappy, and I was unhappy even in the honeymoon period, but it does, in terms of performance, it does kind of compensate and lets you be hyper productive and fill in all these other gaps in your life and manage it for that period of time.
It does. And I think it's like a lot of other drugs that we take that are prescribed or not prescribed: alcohol, marijuana, all of the Ativans and lorazepams, and all of those benzos, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. I really think that they're all just sedatives. There are some people that need them, but I think the vast majority of people in society are aware that they are so uncomfortable with the world around them, the jobs that they're in, the lifestyles that they're being told to live, that they're not okay. Their body and mind is saying, I'm not okay with this. Something should change. This isn't what we're supposed to be doing. And we either compensate by self-medicating. Even food is a huge one. Food, cannabis, alcohol would be your most common. Or we go to the prescription pills, and you get this same solution.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point, and it's one we've kind of discussed a little bit, but under these circumstances, maybe a little more so these days. I know every generation has had their kind of struggles, but we're making the decision to continue to go on, sort of like you did, to continue to go on with that brace and
Yeah.
and just keep working, right? That's what our society is doing in general, I think, is instead of stopping, slowing down and looking around and starting to make noise about the fact that many of us are maybe having trouble sleeping at night because of anxiety, or our relationships, we can't understand why we can't connect properly, these types of things. And I think it's all to do with how many, like, if you're going to call everything like that a sedative, I think that's an easy way of doing it. It's just, how many of these crutches are people willing to use? And I mean, this is not a judgment against those decisions. It's completely understandable why people do that, especially given the pace of our society and what we're expected to do and the pressures of every day. Like what you're doing with you're trying to raise a family, you've got a business, you've got, you're trying to keep your body in some sort of shape so that you've got some longevity and energy. All these things require planning, time, emotional energy, spiritual energy, and not everybody is born with just an inexhaustible wealth of that stuff. It's got to come from somewhere, or the alternative is to basically collapse, right, and let everything kind of fall apart. And that's, I think, a lot scarier for most people than just adding another crutch.
I think that's exactly it. And I know towards the end of my hospital time, that was it. Like, I'm gonna let everybody down. This whole thing is gonna come crashing down around me, and not having the realization that that's exactly what needed to happen and build back better. So so I mean, that was probably, fall of 2010 was, I was using regularly, but I was managing everything pretty fine. We got into the new year of 2011. I think I could be a year off, but it doesn't matter. So into the next year, so I'd been using for 9 months straight every day, and I started taking medication home, and never ever missed a patient dose. You don't have to do that. And there's a huge misperception or misbelief that you're stealing patients' dosages. That doesn't happen. You don't need to. There's an abundance of narcotic everywhere.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the hospital does not track it, monitor it. It is unbelievably easy to steal as much as you want without any great mastermind of doing it. And they just use those Pyxis machines to look back in the data and be like, oh, we know that you took this many. I mean, you've been doing it for a year. Yeah. Awesome. I would steal 20 vials at a time on a unit that wasn't my unit, and just I'd pull up any random patient and add Dilaudid to their med profile and take out as many vials as I wanted, because I was trying to get caught. I was like, how unbelievable can I be so that you'll help me?
Did you have that thought, Shaldun, like that?
100%. By the end, I was 100% there. So, back into the spring, things were starting to fall apart. I was using more. I was emotionally unstable. School I was doing fine scholastically, but relationships were not good. I think. No, I went. I got clean for a little bit in May. Went off for because I was traveling. I was going to Turkey with a friend and with my partner. We actually got engaged in Turkey while we were there. So I was clean there, but I didn't feel great because I was still in post-acute withdrawal, which I would learn about later.
How did you do like a cold turkey?
Yeah, just cold turkey. Cold turkey.
So how is the cold turkey coming off?
It was not good. It was not good. But it was more like just emotional lability. Like, I wasn't using a huge amount at that time. Maybe, again, maybe 10 mils a day, maybe, which isn't that much. 10 milligrams a day is a reasonable, I think, a reasonable dosage of any pain relieving substance. But I mean, I really wasn't in pain, physical pain anymore at that point. I was exercising with my knee, and I was, I remember in Istanbul, I was taking jogs in the morning before people got out of bed. And so, it was fine. But as soon as I got back, I went back to work at the hospital because I was like, okay, I'm cured. It's been 3 weeks, a month. Like, I'm not going to take this ever again.
Yeah.
And, I can't tell you how long it took because I don't remember, but it wasn't more than a shift or 2 or 3. And I was using again.
I made the same mistake. Yeah, I thought, okay, I cold turkeyed, gave myself a month, all fixed. Let's get back at her. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I've got a pretty good willpower. I can just grit it out pretty hard for whatever needs to be done. Anyway, so I went back to work, and here we go again, right back into the roller coaster. So in the fall, I was using quite a bit, and I had tried to taper off in the summer. Didn't really go very well. By the time we got to the fall, my use was ramping up. My relationship was ending, and in a very, very bad way. It was really messy. And I think I just, friendships were deteriorating around me. And that's when I really went off the deep end. So at the end of the summer, when I was tapering, I was down to about 2 milligrams a day. I had somebody helping me with it, and I was pretty confident I could get off. And then my relationship started falling apart, and some other things were happening. And I started using more. And so then I was probably up to like 20 milligrams a day in September. And by October, when I got caught, I guess is the best term, I was using 80 milligrams a day, every day.
Wow.
My partner would wake me up and be like, hey, you're not breathing, or like, are you okay? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm fine. And I'd go to the bathroom and shoot up again, because I was upset that I was blue or not breathing. And, you hear it a lot on all these podcasts. I didn't want to die, but I was okay if I died too. I didn't care.
Yeah, that's how it goes. I think you get to that point where you're so exhausted with fighting that battle. And I think it takes something out of you, realizing that you're throwing every resource you've got at this thing, and it's still winning.
Yeah. And by that time, like I had quit 3 times, pretty much quit 3 times, and gone back to work and been right back into it. And I remember coming back, the second time I had quit, I came back I took a trip out to Alberta to get clean. And I came back and I was like, I don't think I can do the school and the nursing and the renovations and whatever else we're doing in my life. Like, I'm too busy. And I was talking to my partner. I was like, I cannot do any more of this. And she's like, well, you gotta. That's the life we live, and you've got to figure out how to do it. And I remember going to work the next day and being like, okay, I know how to do this all. And I just started injecting again, and away you go.
Yeah.
And then I realized like there was no way I was going to be able to kick this myself at the end of the summer there. And that's when I started ramping up. And I was like, well, they've got to catch me now. I mean, I don't know if this is really appropriate, but like my partner, for everything she did wrong, I done plenty wrong. She took away all my nursing scrubs, so I couldn't go into the hospital when I wasn't working and steal narcotics. So I just went in business clothes, and I don't know what they thought. Like I was wearing dress pants and a dress shirt and just taking meds from the Pyxis. I went in there in pajamas one time and stole, because I was just that desperate. I just didn't care. People were like, what's this guy doing in his sweatpants and pajama shirt taking meds out of the Pyxis system? But nobody said anything. I'm waiting for the phone call that's like, hey, what were you doing? Like,
was it on a ward that you were like recognized on, or were you on a different ward? Just you're in your pajamas, you go back there and
So, being very authentic and honest here, on my ward, I would take medication out of the Pyxis system under my patients' names, under other patients' names. I would take medication out of the Sharps container that was just left there. I would take medications that were just left laying around, the half-used vials. And then I would go into the other units and I would take medication, especially when I was coming in off work hours. I'd come in and take medications out of the ICU at midnight or 1 a.m. or whatever, when the hospital was a little quieter. But I come in at 4 in business clothes, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and just take it out of the ICU machine, right? Like that was kind of, it was insane that nobody, because I had to log, like, why was my logging into the ICU? And nobody said a word that, like, well, he keeps logging into the ICU Pyxis for 12 months. And the only drug he ever needs to take out is Dilaudid. And that drug is in every other ward in the hospital. So I don't blame the hospital. I screwed up. These were a result of my choices and decisions and flawed thinking. And like, they do not do a good job of protecting their staff from their dangerous work environment. I think that's the best way to say it.
Agreed. Agreed. I find it to be sad. Like it's sad in that and I was going to use the term a cry for help, and I don't want that term to sound in any way like sort of demeaning or negative, but like that is pretty overt behavior. And the fact that it was unrecognized or unnoticed by the powers that be, by the pharmacy, by the, even the staff working there, like I find it to be a sad story. Like, well,
I think so. And I think that more people knew what was going on or had inclinations than not everybody was head in the clouds.
No.
My manager, I had some teary conversations with her, which is not normal for me. And I remember just crying to her and being like, I failed. I was on the phone and I was like, I failed. And she didn't ask me, well, what are you failing at? But I think she knew, and she sent me to speak with a therapist. And she's like, I have the name of somebody you should speak with. And maybe she was trying to set me up to be like, hey, here, because we know what's going on and you're going to get tossed. If you have this on record, before you get tossed, you'll be able to say, hey, I'm an addict. I can do this and this and this. Right. There was nurses that were setting me up by putting vials of narcotic and leaving them around the ward, or leaving them on top of the Pyxis machine. And I'm sure, like, coming back and being like, is it gone? Who took it? Like, right. But there's always ways, take the drug out, put saline in it, put it back.
Yeah.
Like, there's all kinds of ways to just play these stupid games. There was a couple of other nurses who they talked to me at shift change, and I'd be a little glossy, and they're like, I think they were involved in other segments of the community, and they'd be like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Why? And they're like, you don't look okay. If you need to talk, I'm here. But it was too subtle for me, right? Somebody needed to take me by the hand and be like, are you using drugs? Let's talk, because I can help you.
Yeah.
Right. And so one day I walked in.
I think there is that fear within the healthcare community to have that conversation. Because I've looked back at the same thing and thought, like, how could they have possibly not seen what the hell was going on and not pulled me aside?
Yeah. I mean, I got to the point where I was wearing a 3/4 sleeve shirt under my nursing scrubs, because I had to hide the track marks, because a porter called me out on having track marks one day. He's like, hey man, you got a lot of bad bruises there. I know what those are from. You better watch yourself. I was like, after that, I wore 3/4 length sleeves.
Wow.
Huh.
Right. Or started using my ankles. That was when I started using my ankles too, because I was getting too many bruises and scars on my arms.
I never asked you about this, Sheldon, but for me, I think there was a little bit of that where I know towards the end, I basically did what you were doing in another form, where I cleaned out the safe well, I took enough so that there was no question that there was a problem there. But I had tried many, many times to just call the college or call the association and just explain exactly what was going on and kind of get the ball rolling that way. But I would phone, I would get the person on the other end and hang up. I don't know why I couldn't do that. I had to do it the way that I did it. And I wonder, was there that kind of motivation there as well? Or were you were thinking, I'm just going to go until the wheels fall off, or
The wheels had already fallen off. I was going to go until I died or they caught me, because I needed help. I knew I needed help. I had tried to resolve it several times and I couldn't. And look at, I'm a relatively smart guy. Now, being a smart guy under the influence of a massive amount of narcotics, you're not a smart guy anymore. You think you are, but you're not. Did my quality of care suffer? Yeah. Was it adequate compared to most other nurses? Sure. And I'm not trying to like knock anybody else or be arrogant. Like, I didn't have complaints about my quality of care. I had complaints about my personal behavior. I had no patience. I was short-tempered with people. I was cruel to people. I was not kind always to some patients. The patients that try our patience. I just lost it with them, and I'd be like, but my quality of care, was I hazard to anybody? I don't think so. I was still able to. Well, it doesn't matter. I was still able to do my job very well. I think nursing is, in my experience, it's a uniquely unpleasant work environment. But I didn't mind the job of nursing. The issue was the interaction with other staff, other nurses, other members of the healthcare team. It's just very, very, very negative. It's very unfriendly. It's unsupportive. And it's not just towards me. You would see it with nurses towards other nurses. It's catty. It's cruel. There's not a lot of mentorship or support. And I think like that it makes it very lonely. It's very isolated. It's that mean girls attitude. It's very cliquey. Without making it a gender thing, it's not a happy place.
No.
Is that something you noticed as well, Corey? And I wonder if that has a little bit to do with the still existing medical hierarchy, which I always point to as something it causes a lot of problems. Yet it's a profession where I think, especially in hospitals, that hierarchy still exists, and it gives people almost a free pass to treat people beneath them with a little more disdain.
Yep, absolutely. I can also say I can take a wild guess, Sheldon, that as a practical nurse, you were probably treated poorly by registered nurses, or looked down on. Is that the case?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's much more of there is a hierarchy issue there for sure, and some people like to utilize it. I never, in my recollection, I don't feel like I was ever treated poorly by a physician, male or female. Nurses are a unique group of people, and they are very, very cruel to one another. I think being a man in a genuine, predominantly female field factors in there somewhere. I think being a practical nurse, and especially during the time I was working as a practical nurse, there was issues like they're laying off the number of, or decreasing the number of RNs on a ward to increase the number of RPNs.
Yeah.
That causes some frustration and some challenges there. Workload, because I'm a guy, because I was a practical nurse, sometimes I would get, or quite often I would get, a very heavy total care assignment, and that pushed several other practical nurses that were on that ward into unhealthy states, into injured states, into unhealthy mental states, and they were beat up, right? I mean, it's probably worth mentioning that there was at least one other nurse, while in the year and a half that I worked on that ward, there was at least one other nurse that went off on a narcotic and alcohol issue. And I remember because when I got caught, I was like, hey, now you'll help me just like you're helping her. And they're like, well, every case is different, Sheldon. And that's the first sign I knew I was in trouble. But I mean, when I got caught, I was happy. I was like, thank God it's all over. Little did I know.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what happened? Did you get a phone call finally, or come in to see us today, Sheldon? Like, what was that? What did that look like?
No, they had all of this evidence on me that I got from the police later. But they actually posted a security guard in what do you call it? A stakeout. And they had a security guard at the hospital posted on a stakeout in the ICU. And I came in one night to steal my meds as per usual. And my password didn't work. And I was like, huh. And the security walks up and he's like, is your name Shaldun Wilson? I'm like, yep. He's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, nothing at all. And he's like, why are you here? What are you doing? I was like, I don't have an answer. I'm going to leave. And the security was like already called. They kind of cornered me in the hall. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, why are you here? I'm like, what business is it of yours? It's just I work here. It's a hospital. What are you doing? And I'm like, why are you surrounding me like this? Like these rent-a-cop people. I was very upset. But I was like, I don't know what you're doing. And they're like, we know why you're here and whatever. I was like, well, are you arresting me? And they're like, no. Okay. Are you detaining me? No. Okay, then get out of my way. I'm leaving. And I left and I was upset. I was crying. I was like, oh, I'm busted.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I mean, I really, by the time I got home, I had some drugs still left there and I injected, and I was like, I better try and space this out because I've got to get from 80 milligrams to 0
real fast
with my very limited supply here. So it was probably a 2-day taper from 80 to 0 and no support from the hospital, no support from the union, no support from from anybody, to be honest. I was sick, sick like I wouldn't wish on anybody. But I don't know. I tend to be self-deprecating and I guess I deserved it. It was my choice to get to that point. And
during that period of time where you were, going from 80 to 0, you didn't receive any phone calls or nobody reached out from the hospital, or?
Honestly, that is really a blur. It'd be hard to tell you the absolute truth. I mean, somebody probably said don't come in.
Yeah.
And I did go in probably the 2 or 3 days later and tried to use my partner's Pixis password and tried to steal drugs under her name because I was desperate. I was beyond desperate, right? And that's when I had that decision, am I going out to use street drugs at this time, or am I going to try and figure this out? And I knew if I started using street drugs, I'm dead. Yeah. It's over. So that was the barrier for me. I was like, okay, I can get through this, but I didn't know if I could get through it. So the hospital must have contacted me and said hey, we know what's going on. Stop. The union contacted me and said, we know what's going on. Stop. And we had a hospital meeting, very quickly. It must have been within 2 weeks. And I met with the union guy there and he said, what do you want to do? Maybe just lay it all out on the table. And I said, do I need a lawyer? Well, no, we are your lawyer. Do I need to do this or that? No, we'll take care of you. We'll make sure you're safe. And I remember going into that meeting and they were just like, so what's going on? And I just laid it out all on the table. I was like, I'm sick. I've been struggling with this. I've been trying to quit. I've talked to you about it. I've done this. I've done that. And they asked me questions. I just answered them. And I was so sick at that meeting, shaking, And, my manager, she said, I think we've got enough here. And Sheldon, we keep beating around the bush, but are you going to be okay? Are you going to hurt yourself? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, well, Sheldon, are you going to kill yourself? And I said, I don't know. And so they made me go and talk to the Emerge doc there. And the Emerge doc was like, yeah, he seems fine. And then, within 2 days, I was sitting on a couch cutting myself and trying to bring up enough courage to kill myself. And my partner came downstairs and took the knife away from me. Right. And then that was pretty scary. And then a couple days after that, I got arrested. And I was like, why am I getting arrested? Well, the hospital's charging you with theft. $200 worth of narcotic, because it's 86 cents a vial. So they had me that they were aware that I had stolen, 250 vials or something. And they arrested me for theft from the hospital. And so I went in, and I could hear the police saying, oh, he's coming off narcotics. We got to be careful. Keep an eye on him. He's on medical or whatever. I spent a night in jail. They questioned me on some stuff. I think they really wanted to know if I was selling it or moving it. Actually, I don't even think that. I think it was just the hospital's way of being like, we don't have to take care of this guy. We can just get rid of him. We're going to use a criminal charge against him. And so I ended up spending for whatever reason, and you never know how the behind the scenes works on this stuff. They couldn't get me into the courtroom that day. It was like a Wednesday or something.
Jesus.
And so they were like, well, I've got to go from central to the remand. Like I've never, I think I was in the drunk tank once when I was 16 years old for one night because I was stupid. Like I've never been in jail. And so then I got sent to remand for a night. And so there I am, having my butt checked for contraband, putting on an orange jumpsuit. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Like all I did was take some drugs from my work, and I'm sick and I need help, and I'm in jail. Like I didn't do anything. That was pretty scary.
So you were actively detoxing while this process was going, like you're talking full blown withdrawal while you're in jail and then being transferred to remand.
Yeah. It probably wasn't the worst of the worst. I was probably a couple weeks in, but I was sick. Like I was barely eating. I was confused to what was going on. All of these meetings took place. And all I know about the timeline is that the first week of December, the union brought me in for a meeting with the hospital, and they're like, you're terminated. And I was like, what? I thought you guys were going to help me. I thought there was a process here. And they're like, well, we pick and choose who we support. And in your case, your length of service and the fact that you're temporary part-time or whatever, we can just abandon you. So good luck, peace. And I'm like, well, what do I do? And they're like, we don't care. Like, fuck off and die. We don't care. And I was like, well, I'm not signing this. And they're like, well, you have to sign. I'm like, right here, it says not under duress. I'm like, I don't know much about what's happening in my life right now, but I'll tell you, I am under duress. Like, I am sick. I am confused. I'm telling you, I need a lawyer. And they're like, it's okay if you need to go and take a walk and call whoever you have to call and then come back and sign it. So I did, because I was like, I don't care. I don't want to go back and work on that unit again. I couldn't even imagine ever going back there, how incredibly hostile that would be.
Yeah.
So I gladly signed it. Well, I don't say gladly sign it, but I signed it, and I was like, now what? And I'll back up just a second. When I was trying to get clean in the summer, I asked for support, and I was calling all kinds of services. I was trying to find rehab that didn't cost $30,000 to $50,000 for a stint. I was, and I had a friend of mine who was calling too. Very smart, very capable person. And she's like, how is this so hard? How can I not find you help? Like, the only help that was like, go to a 12-step meeting, or which in hindsight I should have done, but the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment, and not knowing where to start. But I had somebody who cared about me very much, working very hard to find supports for me. There were none. And you're trying to call a phone number, and they're like, yeah, we're in California, or we're in Phoenix. We're like, well, why do you have an Ontario number? It was just a routing number to get somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I was actually shocked and I guess very heartbroken by the lack of access to anything. Anything. And yeah, it was very sad. So
Your story, this is maybe the most glaring example that I've encountered of this ability of the system to pick, like you said, to pick and choose when it is treated as a medical condition and treated as an illness versus not. And
Yeah.
and how any employer or manager or person with any amount of savvy could look at your story and not see someone who was sick and struggling in that moment. Like, that was not the behavior of a well person by any stretch.
no.
And for them to be able to sort of just disregard that, toss the fact that it was that you were so unwell. It's a shocking story.
It's pretty sad, right? And it's just incongruent with the way they present it.
Yeah.
So I ended up back in that relationship, and for credit for her, like she stood beside me in some form, one way or another. She one way or another, she stood there and didn't completely abandon me. I started getting a little bit better. I remember her and I went to Boston. It was in January or February, to get away from all of the chaos and everything. And we went snowboarding, and I was feeling a little bit better by then. And it was a good trip. And I remember when I was on the trip, I got the phone call that when I got back, I was going to be accepted into Homewood. I was being put through Homewood through the legal system, because I had legal charges pending, and they were putting me through there for the health, because it was a healthcare practitioner program.
So it had nothing to do with the hospital
or the union.
Or the union. So they really just left you.
The hospital and union, that was done. I've had since then, I've had no contact with the hospital or the union.
I always assumed that you ended up in Homewood because of your union.
Yeah, me too.
Fascinating. No. Okay.
No, it was through the court system for whatever. I don't know. I don't exactly know. I hired a good lawyer. I should say I actually believe he's a great lawyer, but he was an expensive lawyer. That's why I hired him. I had no previous interaction with him, but I was like, I'm in trouble here. And so I went to Homewood. I lost my career, and the charges went away. I had to do a year of, I had a conditional sentence. So I had a year of counseling, and I would still talk to that therapist. I at the time, I didn't know that we'd have the relationship and bond that we have, but I've learned a lot from him. I had a very, a bit of an interesting experience with that, probation system and parole officers, and it's a crazy world to be a part of. Like, you're looking at how is anybody supposed to recover or recoup or have a logical thought? And they just, I would ask those questions in all those processes, and they'd say, well, Sheldon, you're not our typical person that's in these programs. Maybe you can bring something and lift these people up. And I'm like, hey, I'm not here for them. I'm here for me. Like, what do you not understand? Like, I'm the one dying. I'm not here to help them. Right. And I that was a recurring theme through my recovery, is like, I don't understand why you guys keep telling me it's my job to help them. Like, I'm obviously not okay. Why are you telling me that I'm supposed to help them? Mm-hmm. So, but through that court process, I ended up at Homewood in February. Let's see,
2013.
Yeah, that actually makes about right sense. So, yep, that's actually probably exactly what it was. So February 2013, I end up at Homewood, and I'm boggled and perplexed. I could not believe what I was seeing or encountering, or the treatment program. I was like, okay, now what's next? And they're like, this is it. I'm like, five more weeks of this? They're like, yeah. Like, wow. Like, there's got to be something else. Like, this is all like kindergarten shit. Like, when do we move on to grade 2 and grade 3? Now, having said that, it's taken me a decade to figure out about some of the stuff they talked about. That's, I just said is kindergarten shit. Take care of yourself. Make sure you eat healthy and regularly. Don't let yourself get run down, tired. Be very careful about your environments. And that is, I mean, nursing is a horrible environment. Like for me, it would have led me right back down the same path. And I don't understand. I mean, all the power to anybody who can do that, but I do not understand how nurses with addiction problems go back into those units and are around narcotics every day and function and are okay. Because even if they're not using, I don't know how they're not okay or how they are okay. I don't get it.
Yeah.
And it's so dangerous because if you screw up, you have the guilt and the shame and the means to end your life.
Yeah.
And that's where I've had this conversation with several nurses who have gone through this stuff, and I'm like, you shouldn't go back to work. Maybe a different capacity as a nurse, that's fine, but being around that stuff, like, it's just a bad idea. I'm sure it can be done. I'm sure there's nurses who are back to work and doing their very best and whatever, but I question how healthy it is for them.
Yeah, I really tend to agree with that. And I think the default stance should be, let's get you healthy. Let's get you to a point where you can make a good decision for yourself. And then we'll talk about maybe going back to work. Not let's get you back to work. Like that's the first thing you hear when you go in to do an IME. And yeah, I feel exactly the same way about anybody who's returning to an environment where those drugs are present, myself included. I mean, I know my limits better now as far as what I can tolerate in that environment. I don't work more than 3 days a week. And it has to be a type of environment where it's not hair straight back, but it's still not good. I know it's not good. I shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
I really shouldn't be there. And maybe it's going to be different now that there's some movement towards, they're starting to allow nurses to work on Suboxone. That provides at least a little bit of safeguard, but I'm telling you, man.
Or is it just another sedative to help them tolerate that environment?
Well, for sure, right? It is. And
now, is it safer? It's safer, but
yeah. I know what you're saying. I don't know. Where do you draw the line? I know we're way, way, way past it in healthcare.
Yeah.
Like the environment, the environment was insane a long time ago.
Yeah.
What nurses are putting up with now is how we're not seeing people collapse on a daily basis. I don't understand.
Well, they're drinking more, right?
Sure.
They're drinking more, they're eating more. You just look at the unhealthy behaviors that are hitting that population. They're just not crossing the lines like I chose to. So they're doing it in what is socially acceptable ways. They're smoking a lot more marijuana. They're using more cannabis. They're using alcohol at higher rates. They're sleeping more. They're zoning out into TV harder. They're just losing themselves. So anyway, back to Homewood. My first experience there, I was there it's a 5-week program. I was there for 32 days. I met several people, a couple, probably one that I'm still friends with. We keep a loose friendship. I met another great guy. He was a nurse in BC. He didn't make it. I don't know if he passed away. I know he went back out and was using on the street. I saw, just the crazy stuff. Like it's like a summer camp for adults who behave like children. You know, the sexual relationships, you know, people are married and they're not going home for the weekend, they're going over with somebody else. And it was, you know, they would talk about it, the counselors would talk about how those things were inappropriate, and you'd look and you're like, well, 3/4 of the people here are doing this shit. Like, do you not see it? Or like they would have people use and come back to the facility, and they'd be like, we like them, it's okay, they're going through stuff, and like, we're going to support them. Now if they used a second or third time, I know we had one lady use a third time and they finally had to say, like, you got to go. But like, you'd have people who, you know, get caught using there. The whole thing was chaotic and crazy. And anyway, with 2 days left, they sent me home. I was like, I have 2 days left in this program. Why are you sending me home? And they just said, lack of therapeutic relationship. I didn't yell at anybody. I didn't get in any arguments. I didn't fight. I didn't have any relationships. I was like, I don't understand. They're like, well, you're asking too many questions, too much relapse behavior. You know, like, I'm like, I thought I'm here to ask questions. I'm trying to figure this stuff out. Like, I'm trying to survive, right? Like, I don't know what my future has. I still thought I was going back to work as a nurse. And so I'm like, I'm trying to figure this out. And I knew I had to get it done for court as well. I'm like, I was so confused and perplexed. And they called, you weren't allowed cell phones there. Cell phones had to stay at home. So they called my partner to come pick me up. And she drove from Hamilton to Guelph, furious, crying the whole way. She got a speeding ticket on her way up, picked me up, and I got in the car and she was shaking and crying. And she just went up me and down me and up me and down me and just everything in the book. They wouldn't tell her why I was kicked out. And I'm trying to tell her, like, I didn't do anything. And can you imagine an addict telling you that I didn't do anything? They just don't like me. Like, but I mean, and then that feeling of absolute rejection and worthlessness, right? Like, how useless, how awful of a human am I to be kicked out of rehab? Like, rehab is the place, and this is not what I believe, right? But in my head at the time, I'm like, rehab is the place for the scum of the earth, the moral degenerates, and I can't even get through that. I'm pretty useless. And I mean, I know that that's what the therapists there were trying to do, right? Now in hindsight, they wanted me to be unbelievably low so that I would go out and use and prove them right. And, you know, to my credit, I just didn't use. I'd already had 4 months of sobriety coming in to rehab. I had drank a little bit, but I wasn't using alcohol inappropriately in any sense of the imagination. I was too sick, right? Like, if I had a drink or 2 drinks somewhere, like while we were out on vacation or whatever, that was it. I had no taste for being hungover at all. Mm-hmm. But, you know, that was, other than, you know, that first week of being off narcotics, that was the lowest I have been in my life. Yeah, it was brutal.
It's also important to make sure everybody understands how dangerous that is, that treatment center particularly. I know of a few people at least who have been in that situation where they're close to the end. They get kicked out and the place won't even call them a cab. You know, they're from BC. They don't know, you know, they're in Guelph. They have there's no family. And Homewood must be aware of what the statistics are of putting somebody out there under those circumstances, you know. And you would think that there would be some kind of safeguard in place to prevent that as an option. Like, I could see, okay, this facility's not working out for you. Maybe we don't have the resources to send you to another one, but we're going to at least check in with you. We're going to make sure that you get home to somebody who cares about you. You know, you'd think that there would be at least those kind of safeguards in place, but they're not in place. And, your chance of relapse and death are way higher when you're coming out of rehab, especially under the circumstances that you're talking about. So I mean, that's something that that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and it really bothered me. So I ended up back at Homewood that second time, but between the first and second time, I saw half a dozen, 8 people kicked out. They seemed to pick somebody every week to make an example of. And every week was the same story. Yeah, by the way, we heard that they used. By the way, they were really sick, or like so and so. I don't know if they told us anybody died. I know they were like, yeah, so and so got kicked out, and it sounds like they went out and used, and so, or someone found them at a bar or whatever. And you look back and you're like, well, if you guys are responsible for the care of this person, you're a hospital, and with sick people in it, and you're kicking somebody out because they're whatever, they did something wrong, or you don't like them, or whatever the reason, you still have an obligation to that sick person, especially if you believe in this addiction as an illness disease model. So the very least they could do is move them to another unit of that giant facility, put them in its isolation somewhere, put them in an Airbnb for a day, put them in a hospital bed, put them somewhere safe where they're supported by somebody else, just for until they can get a plane ticket home or a ride from wherever. Like the reality is, they know that those people almost all the time are going to go out and use. The first thing they're going to do, because they have just been hit with a sledgehammer. They're at their lowest, and the way they fix addicts, the way addicted people fix their lowest and harshest feelings, is by using, sedating those emotions. So they know, they 110% know. And I think they actually intend for you to go out and use, to say, like, look, we're right, you're wrong.
And
it's heartbreaking. That
term, the lack of therapeutic relationship, like when I hear that, I think, well, isn't that on the care providers? Isn't that on them?
Well, especially if you're talking to a sick person. If you believe in the illness model, and I'm sick, I'm here because I am very, very, very ill. I'm an addict at the bottom of my usage, or whatever, I'm sick. I'm not supposed to be easily therapeutic, like, come on. So anyway, so after my first stint in Homewood, which, it was pretty underwhelming. It really didn't do much. I was just like, okay, whatever. Went back. Because I had been involved in the caduceus groups, I tried to get involved in another caduceus group, and they said, nope, not right now. Okay, no problem. I was involved with the court stuff, and Alex, the therapist, was like, you need to be doing 90 12-step meetings in 90 days. So I was doing a meeting every day, maybe 2. I didn't have any job, so why not? That's when I started going down like the IME process. And I was talking to the college and saying, like, well, what am I doing here? And they're like, well, your license, my license wasn't suspended, or wasn't temporary suspended, nothing. I was doing the IME. I was following their protocols. I was doing urine testing at my physician's office, because they wouldn't put me into a caduceus group or put me with a rehab doctor or an addictions doctor until I had completed the rehab. So I was like, well, I'm just in limbo, right?
Was this court ordered, all this with the monitoring at this time, or was somehow now the hospital involved again? You're saying they didn't cancel your license or suspend your license?
My license was never canceled or suspended. Nobody ordered monitoring for me until after I finished my second stint of rehab at Homewood. The union I never spoke to again after that first incident. The hospital I never spoke to again. Just the college directly.
Oh, I see.
And so like I voluntarily went on to a urine monitoring, because I was like, at least I'll have this in my back pocket. And so my doctor was like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, I don't know, call me once in a while and tell me to get my urine checked. And he was like, what? Like, that doesn't okay.
Were you paying for that yourself?
Oh, the Ontario paid for all of it. I never had to pay for a urine sample. I even got VIP treatment because I had a standing order. So every time I walked in, they just, here's your cup. Yeah, I didn't have to wait in line. It was fantastic. So I had no complaints about it. Other than having to do it, at their whim, which is inconvenient, but never had any positive issues, no problems. Yeah, so like I started applying for other nursing jobs in between the two things, the two stints in rehab, and I got offered jobs at all three nursing jobs that I applied for. Surgical trauma center on a different hospital in Hamilton, a long-term care nursing home that they were like, wow, like you have an incredible pedigree, like we would love to have you on our team. And then a very bad, I shouldn't say that, I have no idea, just a less well-funded nursing home outside of town with no air conditioning, and it didn't look like very good work environment. All three of those places offered me a position. All three of those places, I said, hey, here's my situation. I had a drug use issue. I was using narcotics. I'm doing all of the processes. I'm clean and sober. I'm doing urine monitoring. I will comply with anything you want. I need a purpose. I need to be back at work. And they all said, no problem. We'll hire you and we'll figure that out. Thanks for being really genuine and authentic with us. And every time within a week, I was given a phone call. Sorry, we can't hire you. I even showed up for my first day of training at one of the long-term care homes, and then the day after my first day of training, maybe even got 2 days in, and then I got a call saying like we can't hire you because, and they didn't say it was because of that, but it was 100% because of that. Right? Yeah. They're like, the manager's like, I can't tell you that it's because of that, and I can't hire you. And like I wish there was more that I could do, and I wish there was more I could talk about it. I think you're fantastic, and good luck. So, you have an illness that you're monitoring, you're doing it. Hey, I'm diabetic, but I'm taking insulin. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm watching my diet. I'm exercising regularly. Yeah, you're diabetic. You don't get to work for us.
Yeah.
Now, in hindsight, way better. Okay. Like, I'm glad that I didn't get those jobs. I'm glad I'm not a nurse anymore. And I'm very confident that if I had gone back into an environment where there was narcotics, I probably would have used again. Okay. But that is incongruent with the bullshit that you were told.
Yeah.
Okay. So just be honest. Like, just get a better path, right? Hey, you use drugs at work. That's not okay. You're not going to go back there ever. What we can do for you is this. And if you don't like this, then you're not a nurse here anymore, or a nurse anywhere anymore. And that's okay.
Yeah. They need to pick a lane. This is the problem. Yeah. You can't straddle the line. No. Where you're compassionate and empathetic about the fact that the person has a disease on this side, and we're calling the cops. You can't just pick one. Yeah. I don't care which one it is.
No, and it's okay either way.
Yeah,
it really is. Like, there's a lot of members of the caduceus groups that I've been a part of, including yours, and some people seem to have a bit of a sense of like, this is entitlement and they should be doing everything to support me. And I don't know that it's the employer's position to do that. Like, they do have an obligation to be honest and to say, hey, in 2 years, you're not going to be a nurse. So let's help you move in another direction. Not let's fuck your life up for 2 years and then screw you up. Yeah. Right. Just be honest. Like, if you break your back, you don't get to keep being a fireman. If you can't walk, you can't be a fireman. Well, if you do drugs at work as a nurse, you can't be a nurse who delivers narcotics, and that's okay.
Yeah. So just to keep us rolling, when did you end up back in Homewood?
Well, whatever time, Nathan, we ended up there. It must have been in the summer, June.
June, yeah.
Yeah.
It was June 2013.
Yeah. So in between then, I'd had my IME, and without going into it, I mean, the shocking thing about my IME was completely unprepared for the questions that they asked. Shocked at what they asked, like sexual history, sexual partners, sexual preferences. I was like, is this guy getting off on the stuff I'm telling him? Like, what is going on here? And then in the waiting room, there was like part of the questionnaire, the intake was like, how often do you have your chakra balanced? I shit you not. The intake form said, how often do you have your chakra balanced? Do you believe in like crystals and like it wasn't crystals and unicorns, but like it was some Eastern medicine stuff that I was super, super uncomfortable with, and that isn't mainstream at all. And I'm like, I'm going to talk to this insane person and he's going to give me a diagnosis of whatever. He believes in chakras. I still today don't know what a chakra is, but it sounds foofy. Yeah, like, I don't know what else to say.
That doesn't like the DSM-5 doesn't talk about chakra balancing as part of the diagnostic criteria, and that's kind of what the guidelines. I mean, the whole thing is set up on those guidelines. So yeah, that's odd.
It was so odd. It was, again, just such an odd experience. And like, again, told him everything, probably far more than I should have. But I mean, I'm honest to a fault is probably my biggest flaw. That, you know, it doesn't always serve me well. But I don't lie. I can't get away with it. I just am the world's worst liar. Where do we end up there?
So this led you back to Homewood.
Yeah, so they, you know, that I had to finish Homewood for the court and the legal stuff, and for the college. So I went to Homewood the second time, and I just sat back, and the counselors and the therapists and the doctors and everybody were kind of like, you know, Sheldon, you seem like you're just going through the motions. I'm like, yeah, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Like, I'm not playing your game, right? I was Nathan, you and I were in the same support group, the same group, right? And so like I just sat there and I was like, yep, yes sir, no sir, thank you sir, may I have another sir? Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, yeah, praise Jesus, let's do more 12-step. The problem with Homewood is there's not enough 12-step meetings. That, you know, like whatever they wanted to hear, I said. It was fine. And they're like, you know, they always ask a question, you know, how many of you are here for a reason other than to get better? And I would put up my hand proudly. I'm like, I'm getting through this thing with flying colors. You can send me home now. You know, at this point, I'd been clean for about 6 months. I had drank, you know, occasionally very small amounts, which they wouldn't consider clean, which is fine. And, you know, I didn't really understand that. I still don't really. You know, I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to go there, and I made some realizations. Number one, the first time I went through Homewood, I was still really, really, really sick. I was really confused. I couldn't put 2 and 2 together. I thought I was okay, but I wasn't. That's post-acute withdrawal. And for me and from opiates, I think that's an extended period of time. I think it was two years for me, because even after Homewood and the next couple of years, I went through a lot of really difficult mental health periods, right? I wouldn't call it, I honestly, at this point, I wouldn't call it depression or anxiety or anything like that. But like, I had trouble like leaving the house. I had trouble finding pleasure in anything. I think it was just post-acute withdrawal. I can just go right back to there. You know, the amount of dopamine that I was screwing up in my brain, it took a long time for things to balance out. And I don't think that was helped by my physician, who prescribed a bunch of supportive medication that I never found supportive. Like, you know, they were just sedatives that allowed me to tolerate things that weren't uncomfortable. You know.
Yeah, and that's going to be different for everybody. And again, it's a situation where we just have limited tools, and the amount of understanding as far as post-acute withdrawal goes is still like it's painful how little we know about these conditions.
Yeah,
there's starting to be some improvements there, and some therapies that actually, you know, move you to the kind of state where your mind is clear, you're not as emotionally labile, faster. But it's we need to do better there.
Yeah,
and the awareness even needs to improve. Like, how could I make it through however many years of university, and you know, I'm as a pharmacist, I had no clue what post-acute withdrawal is. but it is the biggest thing. I mean, anybody can tough out acute withdrawal. Like anyone can be super sick for a week or two. You can do that. But looking down the barrel of a year or two of just feeling shitty, that's hard to cope with. And if you don't know what's coming, that makes it all the worse.
And it doesn't get drilled home. It doesn't, even when you leave there, hey man, just remember you got 2 years to get your head straight. You're really sick. You're still really sick. Like, and just, keep drilling it in. Like, you're in this post-acute phase, like your brain is rewiring itself. Make sure that you're doing the right stuff to rewire it properly.
Yeah. And not to discourage, I don't want to discourage people out there. There's no set amount of time. Some people are lucky, they can use a tremendous amount of narcotics and be through post-acute in a matter of months. Other people, it takes a long time. It's just I think it's a genetic variable. And then, like you said, Sheldon, it's how well you're treating yourself, how fast you bounce back depends on your nutrition, your exercise, all those types of things.
Yeah, your environment.
Yeah.
So you know what? Going back to Homewood the second time, it was probably one of the greatest blessings I've received in my recovery. You guys have touched on it, that like the 30-day program immediately after detox is just insane, right? So going back and taking it all in again with a very different perspective. So the first time I was very restless, very agitated, trying to figure it out. I was scared. I was dying. I was, I was panicky. I was anxious. The second time going in, and I was so amazing to just look across the room and see you, Nathan, and look at that mirror. It was like a time machine. And I was like, wow, this guy is really uncomfortable. He's really emotional. I was like, I know what's going on. He's me 2 months ago. And I stayed back away because I didn't know how you were going to receive it, because you're pretty agitated. You're a pretty big guy. And I was like, I don't need a conflict. That's genuinely how irritated I could see that you were. And I was like, I don't need to get kicked out because I get into an argument with this guy.
I was mad.
And, yeah, 100%. And I remember we ended up talking about some things, or we ended up in a situation with a couple people around us. And I said, look, man, if you want, I'll tell you my opinion. You were like, yeah, go for it. It's like, this is the game. And, I'm here to get healthy, or I was here to get healthy, and I'm doing good, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, but this is just an obstacle in your way. This is not the cure. And I'd encourage you, just for what it's worth, sit back, take it in, and understand that you're not going to get better from being here. But do what you want. Keep going down the path you're going down, because you resisted that conversation. And I was like, hey man, it's totally up to you. But if you keep doing this, they're going to toss you. So you figured out, I'm here for you if you need me. See you later. Because I was terrified of you. Like in a good way, right? I wasn't scared you were going to punch me or anything like that. But I was like, I don't want a conflict with somebody in here. I cannot be kicked out again. This will destroy my life. But I had enough insight at that time that I didn't have 2 months before that.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I remember, like, you got to come, because you were from BC, they let you come to my house for the weekend. I don't know if you said you were going to a hotel, or if you were allowed to come to my house.
No, I think they allowed that after a period of time.
I think so too. Yeah. And I was like, this is recovery. And we went for a walk in the forest, and we played with my dogs. And I was like, this is what it's about. It's not that shit.
Yeah.
It's like, if you want to go to a meeting tonight, we can go to a meeting. I know 20 meetings that are happening today, but this is what fills my bucket.
Yeah. That's when I started to understand that too. I was looking for, I think all of us have that kind of proactive, we're people who we got an academic background, or we're fairly driven. And when a problem arises like that, you want to fix it. You want to go after it. You want to get it. And this problem is one where I think there's just a set amount of kind of time that you need to process. And what I noticed there was that the processing and the positive things I was getting out of that treatment were all to do with the connections I was making with people who were genuine, and people who were there they were they were seeing the situation for what it was. They saw it with clear eyes. It wasn't this course that you were going to take and come out the other side with some sort of a diploma and away you go. It was a different thing. And I'll always be grateful that you did that, because I'm pretty sure I would have got kicked out that first time. I don't know what would have happened. I probably would have been, I'd been off hard opiates for quite some time before going in there. So it wasn't a detox situation, but I still felt like shit, and I was looking for answers. And had you not been there, I don't know, that would have been a different path for sure.
For sure. Right. And I remember, just saying, just sit back and take it in instead of trying to process it. And you did. I remember sitting in the smoke pit and having cigars, and we're just like, just watch this insanity. And you're watching what's happening around you, and you're like, can you believe this? And like, did you know that person's fucking that person and that person's doing this thing? And you totally pivoted in the matter of a couple of days, and you didn't become a caregiver, but like you stopped being someone searching for answers and just became a spectator. I don't know exactly the right words and terminology for it, but like you got involved in like other people's worlds, right? You've talked about one of the girls that we met and her horrible situation. You got really involved in her world, and you started seeing people for the bullshit that they were talking, like the patients as well. And you're like, you're crazy, or like you're just childish in your thinking. I'm just going to distance myself from you. And you surrounded yourself with the right people, obviously, because we're great friends, and you got through it. Right.
I still like Sheldon. One of the first things I remember about, we'd been friends already for a little bit, but I came up from the basement. They only let you work out like very little, so you had to get in there at the right times and stuff. But I'd left my sweater in one of the rooms prior that morning, and I come up there, and Sheldon is wearing my sweater, and he's like putting on a show in the main like entertainment room there, pretending that he's me, and he's walking around all fucking pissed off and like kicking things and everything, and I'm just standing out there watching this, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah. But
it's kind of beautiful that like what you were teaching, Nathan, or at least what I'm getting from this is that there's an amount of surrender where it's like just letting go of that need for it to be linear, the need to kind of try to control it and to resist all of the garbage that is kind of you're getting inundated with. And it's in doing that you kind of make room for what is actually therapeutic, right? Like you guys are saying, like the relationships, like nature, petting a dog, like looking at the leaves on the ground, whatever it may be for the individual, but that resistance to the process interferes with your ability to actually heal, right?
Yeah. You can't fight it. Like if you're going to go in there and you're going to try to fight your way to the finish line, and that's generally my default when I'm really, I'm in a situation where I don't know what the hell is going on. I'm generally going to fight first and ask questions later. And that was not working. It wasn't serving any purpose. I was burning all sorts of energy for no purpose. And Sheldon saw that. And there's something to it. I mean, there's a certain amount of it that you have to let happen. You just can't proactively be involved to a certain extent, but you can't totally let go either, because the industry is so fraught with nonsense that if you just open yourself up to everything, your brain's going to fall out basically, because there's just so many, there's so much poor information.
Yep.
So Sheldon, when you were in Homewood the second time there, or how soon after that did you realize, okay, my career is not a viable option any longer, my nursing career?
Yeah. So I guess that would have been the end of June, right? And very shortly after getting out of that program, I found out that my partner and I were pregnant with our first son. And it was it was an interesting period of my life, and I was like, I don't know if this is the best time to have a child. Are you sure you want to do this? And she was like, I'm all in. And I was like, okay, then so am I. And quickly I changed gears, right? I kicked it up a notch. I did whatever I was told to do with recovery. At that point, I was in caduceus groups. I was in touch with the college. I was doing everything I needed to do. I was back into renovating houses. I was working for a contractor because I couldn't just sit around anymore. I thought that was ridiculous. Like even that, I think that a huge part of recovery is getting active in another field or getting active in any field, but you've got to do something. The sitting around is so unhealthy for one's mind and soul and heart for that matter. So I was working for another contractor, and I was like, my partner was like, he's screwing you on money. You know that. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I just need to be out of the house. And like, to be honest, I wasn't the best employee because I'd be like, I don't want to work on Friday. I'm going fishing. And he'd be like, we've got stuff to do. I'm like, I don't care. Then fire me. Like, I don't need your money. You're screwing me on paychecks. You've got other guys. Like, I don't care. I'm taking care of me a little bit. Right. And he was pretty reasonable, even though he was irritated by it. It was fine. But so I went through and I was such a good little student, man. Like I did my urine test when I was told. I never missed anything. Everything, dotted all my I's, crossed all my T's. I still thought I was going back to nursing. And then we had our son, and I couldn't have been happier. I did another whole year of being on monitoring after that. Because we ended up getting and I was just doing contracting. Yeah. And we ended up in May. I guess it was my wedding anniversary 2 days ago, which is funny. I've been trying to get divorced from this person for 5 years. So I had a good chuckle when Facebook reminded me of that the other night. So we got married in Mexico. Nathan was there, and I had my 1-year-old son with me and some great friends. And I got back from the wedding, and I had a rash, like full body rash, and I had taken Ventolin and antihistamine. And as soon as I got home, I went to Emerge, and I was like, hey, I've got this rash. I'm having trouble breathing. And then I went to my next caduceus meeting, and they strung me up. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I've never had an issue here at all. And they're like, well, your urine came back positive for this. You missed 2 urines last week, and like, we're so concerned about your behavior. And I was like, I would told everybody here, like, I've been telling you that I'm getting married in Mexico. Well, why were you getting married in Mexico? So you could use drugs? What? No, because I wanted to get married in Mexico because my family is from all across Canada. It doesn't make sense to fly them to Hamilton, or us to fly our Hamilton friends to somewhere else. Like, this just made sense. We didn't have to put in any work. We just showed up. Everything was done for us. Like, we got to party for a week with our friends. That fishing trip, we got that huge sailfish, like made amazing memories. It was just awesome. There's no drinking. There's no drug use. There was nothing. Well, you came back positive for antihistamine. Yeah, this giant rash that I have an Emerge report, and I couldn't breathe. What do you want me to do on the plane? Like, you have to have a doctor's order to take antihistamine, and they're just all piling on. I'm like, you guys are nuts. Like, you're literally nuts. And he's like, okay, so we're gonna and you missed your urines. I was just like, I don't know what to tell you. I've been clear for the last 6 months that I was planning this wedding. I've told you guys here, nobody ever brought it up as an issue. I wasn't in Canada. Where did you want me to do my urines? Like, and I did a urine before I left, and I did a urine as soon as I got back, within like 24, 48 hours max. and the only thing that was in it was antihistamine, which I told them I took. And so they're like, well, we're moving you backwards and we're really on your urine monitoring program. And we're really worried about this. We're really worried about that. And I just said, I've had it with you guys. Like, you're nuts. So I still went for like another month or two. I had gotten my real estate license just before that. I got my real estate license because I got a blood clot in my lung, totally at random, and I couldn't do renovations. I couldn't do anything. So I got my real estate license while I planned our Mexican wedding, and I really didn't want to sell real estate. I was just going to sell the houses that we were flipping. But anyway, it's like, I'm like, I don't need you. I don't need this nursing BS. I don't even know what I want to go back to, but it was giving up all of those. It was giving up that identity, and it was giving up who I had become. You know, I think nurses in particular identify themselves as a nurse instead of like, I'm a person and I work as a nurse.
We have a joke in pharmacy. For some reason, one of my colleagues years ago noticed this, and every other health professional, even doctors, when they come into the pharmacy, you don't know they're a doctor. They'll let you do your spiel, whatever. They don't, unless they're actually there to write a prescription. They don't tell you. Yeah. They don't care. It's just, I don't know what it is. Vets, they don't say anything. Dentists don't say anything. Other pharmacists, they won't even say anything most of the time. But a nurse, every single time they come in, they have to get that in the conversation somehow. Yeah. And I don't know what it is.
Vegans, CrossFitters, and nurses. Like the evil trinity, I tell you.
Yeah. It's just, it's remarkable. Yeah. But it's so consistent.
Again, I love nurses. I have zero issues with nurses, but it's a unique thing where they walk around and they're like, yeah, they're a nurse. So
the identity piece is real.
Huge. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, 100%. Yep. And looking at it and saying like, I'm giving up all these things that I'm good at. I'm giving up all of the effort and money and time that I've put into obtaining these degrees. You know, like I that was the heartbreaking thing. That was really what I had trouble giving up. And I was like, okay, I'm just done. And then I really dug into the renovations harder, and the herniated disc in my back was, telling me I shouldn't keep doing that. So I had a ton of pain from a herniated disc. I have referred pain and numbness in my hands. And I'm telling my doctor, hey, I've got all this pain from my back. It goes into my hands. And he's like, oh, you want narcotics? No, sir, I don't want narcotics. I need a fix. Can I have a surgery? Can I do this? Can I do that? No, you're a junkie. No, I'm not a junkie. I need a fix. That came up when I ended up in the hospital with the blood clot. I go back. That's an interesting story. I'll take a minute. I go to the hospital. I go to Emerge, and I'm like, hey, I'm having trouble breathing, and I'm in a ton of pain. And they do some assessments, and they're like, you're a drug addict, get out of here. I'm like, what? Like, where? I don't even know how this got into my file, how they found this stuff out. But I'm like, they're like, you're fine. And they sent me home. And I was like, I'm really not fine, but I don't know what the pain is. So, okay, I left. And the next day the pain was unbearable. I was taking my dog to a vet in a nearby town, and I end up in the Emerge there. And I'm like, I'm in agony. Like, I'm serious. Like, I'm having a heart attack. Like, I don't know what's going on. You got to help me. And they take me kind of serious. But one of the nurses that was on staff there was a nurse that I worked in Hamilton with, who knew about my drug issue. And as soon as she saw me, she went up to the doc and said, psst, 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 whispered in his ear, and everything changed. And he said, we've done what we've done. You really shouldn't be here. You're not even from this area. He was giving me the "you're an addict, get out of here" speech. And I looked at him, and like, my wife is in tears. My son's with me. This is not, he's hungry. He's I guess he would have been like 6 months old at the time. And I looked at the doctor and I said, if you send me home and I die, she's going to sue you for every fucking thing you in this hospital have. I know that that nurse over there told you I'm an addict. I had problems. I have done nothing and I am in huge amount of pain and I can't breathe and I'm not okay. Figure it out. And like, and I was stern. I don't think I was aggressive, but I was very stern. I was like, she will sue you if I die. I'm not okay. Don't send me home. And so they end up sending me for a spiral CT scan and saw a pretty substantial blood clot in my lung. And he was like, I'm so sorry. Here's all the narcotics. And I was like, I don't even want narcotics. Like, what do you do? I'm just in horrible pain and like blood thinners and everything else, right? And he's like, you need to follow up with these people. And I went to my physician. He's like, you're high. And I'm like, yeah, I'm high. I'm in agony. I went to emerge because I was in agonizing pain. They sent me home. I showed up the next day again in incredible amounts of pain. Like, you have to understand the fear and the shame and the conversations I know I'm going to have going into an emerge at that time. And like, I'm here not for narcotics. I'm here because I'm really, really, really sick. Something's not okay. So I end up with that. A couple days later, I call him. I'm driving. I'm like, hey, doc, I'm having trouble breathing. Like, I'm in so much pain. And he's like, you're not getting more narcotics. Like, go to the hospital. I'm like, well, they're going to treat me like this and this. Like, he's like, you're not getting more narcotics. I'm like, well, I'm scared to go back. They're going to just, if you have problem, you got to go to the emerge. That was his attitude. I went to emerge and they're like, oh yeah, you have a pleural effusion now, which is, fluid surrounding my lung on my left side, compressing my heart. And they're like, we need to admit you because we need to double your blood clot's gotten bigger over like 4 days.
Jesus.
We need to admit you so we can increase your anticoagulant and monitor you in case this is blood and not just serous fluid in between your lung and crushes your heart, or you bleed out and die. And they just treated me like, no, you're just a junkie, even when I came back to emerge. And so now I'm back on the ward. They've got me medicated and I'm resting comfortably. And the doctor walks in and is like, well, we're decreasing your pain meds. And I was like, why? I'm in so much pain. This is the first sleep I've had in 4 days. What are you doing? Well, you don't need pain meds. And I started crying. And she's like, you can't get what you want just from crying. And I'm like, bitch, do you understand that this is like the second time I've cried in the last 10 years? Like, do you know anything about me and what I'm going through? Like, I'm in here and you guys are telling me I'm insane, that nothing's wrong with me, even though there is quantifiable objective evidence that I have a pleural embolus and now a pleural effusion. And you have admitted me because I am at a risk of dying, genuinely a risk of dying. And you're still telling me there's nothing wrong with me and I'm just a junkie. That it's one of the most painful experiences I've ever had. And even my partner was like, I like, she's standing there bewildered. Like, Sheldon, they're telling me you're fine. I'm like, yeah, but on my report, it says I have these problems. Yeah, but she's saying that there's no pain associated with that. But the evidence is abundantly clear. Blood clots hurt. Pleural effusions hurt. And they cause a lot of anxiety when you can't breathe. I don't know, man. That was wild. So
Stigma is so powerful.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What a journey. So, I guess it takes us back to getting my real estate license and giving up on the whole nursing thing. I had a lot of shame around the addiction stuff, so I did my very best to hide it. And now I kind of wear it as a badge of honor, and I'm doing very well. I'm really successful, and
can you tell us a few things about what you do now? Because obviously your life is quite challenging in that you've got 3 children, you've got a business that's a tremendous amount of responsibility. You're doing very well, and that's awesome. But I think there's a a level of, commitment that comes with that. So you're doing all these things. And what happens when, everybody continues to have stress, everyone continues to have troubles in life? What kind of things are you doing now that are important to you to keep you kind of on the right track?
So I think to answer that question, it's important to rewind a little bit with the last, 5 years since I got my real estate license and started working. It hasn't been a smooth path. The stress of this career is not unlike the stress of any other career. It's when working 7 days a week, I'm on call. People need to get a hold of me. They have questions. You're taking care of client needs, and that's important to be successful, that you're around for that. There's a lot of networking and socializing, and that comes with a lot of restaurant environments and bar environments, a lot of alcohol at these events. I wouldn't say I've ever lost myself in alcohol over the last 5 years, but I certainly have drank more than I'm comfortable with, or drank more regularly. I end up, we had a second baby, and my partner got some pretty bad mental health issues after that, and we couldn't stay together. And so I have a divorce that's very, very traumatic and problematic, and it causes a lot of issues. I've got leaving that relationship, I had massive financial issues. Divorce is really hard on anybody. I had to, as a single dad, and somebody who had addiction issues, I've had to prove myself to have access to my own children. Now, I've had access the entire time, but it's not exactly how I would like it to be. It's I see my kids half the time. It's just not where it should be, without going into the weeds on that. So my life is still very stressful. It's not smooth. I have a new partner. We have a daughter. And so raising a little one, our little girl's 3.5, with her brother's half time, and it's been challenging. And then COVID, right? Like, just when you think you're climbing up, you're doing okay, COVID happens and you're locked up. And during the time I was locked up, I ate too much. I put on 30, 40 pounds. I drank too much. I just, but I don't think these things are unique to addicts. Everybody suffers them, and they just fill that void in whatever way they do, right? And maybe we're more susceptible, or we fill it in less healthy ways. So it hasn't been always the smoothest path, but I made a decision, and I have a business coach who is becoming a wonderful friend of mine. And he really pushed me to take care of myself first. And he gave me some books from Ryan Holiday to read. Ego is the enemy, Stillness is the key, and The Obstacle is the way. And in reading those 3 books, I have such an incredible perspective on life. I think everybody should really jump into those Ryan Holiday books, because it's just changed who I am over the last 9 months, an incredible amount. I'm building habits that build on top of other positive habits, and it pushes out the space for negative behaviors, because they cannot live in the same space. Because of the exercise, I have to take better care of myself, and then I show up better for my family, my friends, my clients, my business, and then I have less downstream problems because I'm taking care of everything upstream, right? I have more energy because I'm eating better, and I'm still fighting this battle, right? Like, my goal is 0 alcohol. And right. And so I share in that Caduceus meeting that you guys have graciously let me be a part of. I'm frustrated that 0 is a hard goal for me to hit. I wish I could just not pick up a beer on a Friday afternoon, but I love having a beer on a Friday afternoon at the patio. And I beat myself up over those 2 beers. Now, after those 2 beers, I go home, I hang out with my family, I have a nice dinner, and then I go and meet a good friend of mine. We do 10 sets of the Hamilton stairs. It's 3,000 stairs. And then I go for a 5-kilometer walk and I get home around 11:30. And I'm up at 5:30 a.m. hanging out with my family. I'm going and watching sunsets with my sons, drinking hot chocolate, watching My Little Pony. Like these experiences, they can live in the same space, right? Like I can have a beer, but I've been so ingrained that it's evil or it's wrong or that I can't do that because of who I am.
Yeah, I think that there is some definite impact there. And I've watched you over the last, a few years, but especially over the last year, where I think before you were saying what you wanted to do as far as I'm going to put myself first, I'm going to do this kind of stuff. But I wasn't seeing it. And I was seeing you were really, really struggling. And then something clicked. And I think you saw that it was actually the more efficient way of living your life, where you're concentrating on making sure that you're in as good a shape as possible for the people you care about. And you've done it.
Yeah. So
yeah. And the residual things, like whether or not it's okay to have a couple of beer, these are things that you're going to figure it out. Everybody's got a line, and it's unfortunate that, again, it's a stigma. It's a residual of antiquated belief systems where everything is all or nothing, black or white. That's not how life works.
No,
it's always shades of gray.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it's been remarkable. Yeah, because you have resources, but you also work really, really hard. And yeah, it's quite inspirational.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I owe it to the people I surround myself with, to my environment. The people that are there. Nathan, you're one of those people, right? Your podcast, that's an environment. It's a space that's really, it gives me a lot of insight. So even though we can't connect as much as it would be great, we both run busy lives, like I can connect with you there. And I don't agree with everything you discuss, but I agree with much more than I disagree with. And we're all just on a path, right? Like, my coach, he sent me something when I was beating myself up on things. He's like, man, you need to have some grace with yourself. Be patient. He's like, you haven't met who you're becoming yet, right? Like you're just on this journey. And I love, again, I'm even reading those Ryan Holiday books I'm not plugging them, by the way. I think they're so great. I'm reading the one with my son right now because he's very much like me. He's a very busy, very active kid. And so we're reading Stillness is the Key, and it's way over his head, but he gets the important parts. And then, honestly, I love watching Kung Fu Panda with him because Kung Fu Panda is the answer to everything, right? It's like Zen and Chi and wisdom. Like, you just got to listen to Oogway. And so like we're watching it the other morning. It's 5:30 in the morning, and him and I are sitting down there, and he's just watching it, and I'm like, enjoying my quiet morning time with him. And he's like, Dad, Oogway's talking about what we read in the book last night. And I'm like,
wow,
yeah, man, he is, right? And like, but because I'm sober, because I didn't drink the night before, I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I feel really good, and I sit there with him. I'm present, and that fills my heart. It fills my heart like you can't believe. And then the other stuff doesn't get to me during the day, and I don't feel a need to drink or drug or whatever, right? And so I think like a big part of our recovery is protecting ourselves, filling our buckets with all of this positive stuff that is all around us. And being really careful about the negative stuff we allow to impact us.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, it crossed my mind about 2 minutes ago to ask you about gratitude and what the role that gratitude has been for you. And I think you're answering it as you were speaking there about that living in gratitude, or just like being aware of these good things and these little beautiful moments and things that fill us up, that there is much less space for that negativity to come in when when we pay attention to the things that we have to be grateful for, right?
That's it. And when you're sedated, you can't take that stuff in. Your vision is just so narrow.
It is.
Yeah.
Right. And so I found that and again, this is speaking for me personally, when I was put on the anti-anxiety meds and the antidepressants, I wasn't on anything very strong. I was just on the, whatever the generic weak crap that they give everybody, Celexa. And here, something's wrong with you, take this. And I was like, there was just no peripheral vision. You're just tunneled down and you can't let that in. And I remember that's one of the biggest and scariest things I had in my addiction was I remember walking outside one day. It was beautiful and the sun was shining and I was so excited. No, I shouldn't. I was so excited. I walked outside and I couldn't feel the sunshine on my skin. And it was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Right. But it's those things like I've got a great tan. This to me is terrifying to be on here with you guys today. Right. So this morning I got up at 5:30 and I went and golfed a round of 18 holes with a good friend of mine. And I got myself centered and grounded. I got a whole bunch of sunshine. I drank a whole bunch of water. Didn't drink a drop last night. Got a good rest, and I'm much more present for this conversation than I'd be if I was a little bit hungover.
Yeah.
Right. Another wonderful memory was my son asked me one night, it was probably a year ago, maybe Canada Day long weekend or the May 24. He said, Dad, can we go and watch fireworks? And before I had a chance to say no, I was like, why not? I haven't drank anything. I haven't drugged anything. I feel good. Let's go. And he has that memory. And he's like, Daddy, when can we go do this? When can we do it again? And I don't know. That's Popeye spinach to me, right? Yeah. It just feels so good that you can't take me down when I have that around me. I had a really tough conversation with somebody important in my life on Friday, and the end of the conversation didn't go well. And my daughter was at a table at the restaurant nearby, and she came over and just sat on my lap, and I was like, I'm okay. Right? That's what I'm here for. Mm-hmm. I know my purpose, and having, whatever I do in real estate, no matter how successful or big our business comes or money we make, I use that for opportunity for my children. And that's my driving force. I don't care. I'm not Scrooge McDuck. I don't need a whole bunch of money in a vault. The more I make, the more I'll give back. Right? The more opportunities my children have, the more that I will teach them to support other children who are less fortunate and do that. I mean, I come from a very unforgiving environment. I don't know how else to say it, right? But I think that's the driving factor is what can we give out? How can we make the world a better place? And it starts looking inside and just taking care of yourself. And then when you do that, you just start giving, and you give to as many people around you as you can.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty awesome. Well said.
And that's creating sustainability there, right? That ensures that we continue to fill ourselves up with that, and that it doesn't become like this one-way well that doesn't sort of regenerate itself. And so yeah, I think that's a great just a great insight to say that you got to that place and learn that of how to kind of keep this going. It's awesome.
It's like a spiritual ecosystem. If you've got it set up properly, it kind of runs itself, right? But I mean, setting it up and maintaining it is the main thing. But yeah, man, that's
Nathan, that's the trick. I really do think it is. And so, again, I've listened to you and talked to you so many times, and I come from a place that's really similar with mindset. For whatever reason, really negative, really judgy, really impacted by the nonsense I see in the world around me, or the injustice to people and places that this doesn't make sense. Like, am I, and I know I've asked you before, I'm like, am I insane? Like, I really feel like I'm insane in this world. And you're like, no, bro, like you are not the insane person. Like people who don't have a problem with what's going on, that's insanity. Right. And so but the more that I focus on building these from a scientific perspective, I think I have no evidence whatsoever, but the more I focus on building these healthy pathways and looking for gratitude instead of looking for the negativity and immersing myself in like happy, positive stuff. Like I listen to the silliest music. I've got Pitch Perfect soundtrack playing on my car right now. It's amazing. You should try it. I get teased about it all the time, right? Like Megan Trainor is my girl. Like, so between podcasts and like absolutely silly music, like I'm having a blast, and I just keep building those pathways, and I need that happiness and joy. And look at, I golf once, sometimes twice a week. I run like with my coach, my business coach, mind you, not a personal trainer. This is my business coach. 250 workouts this year. That's what his expectation is of me. I'm behind a couple, so but even those workouts, like I don't go to the gym. The gym doesn't really fill my bucket. It doesn't make me happy. I go to yoga. That makes me happy. I go and run the stairs outside. That makes me happy. I go and run or go for a bike ride or chase my kids. That makes me happy, really happy. So like, I don't know. You got to put some. One of the things we talk about in real estate is, we lean on our friends in our sphere for real estate business. So we say you've always got to make a bunch of deposits with your friends and family and sphere before you ask them for something. Like, hey, let me do all these things for you, and then maybe if you know somebody, you can help me too, right? Make the deposits before you make a withdrawal. How stupid are we that we just don't turn that around on ourselves?
Right.
Right. On the Bank of Sheldon, I better make some deposits if I'm going to make all these withdrawals, because I get into the red pretty fast, and that's not a good place to be. You can't run it like that. No. Wow, that was a wicked analogy. I'm so
that
smart.
was good.
You're on fire, brother. You're on fire. It's awesome. Yeah, I think you got through those questions really, really well, man. It's there's a ton of great information in there, and even some I put together a couple of things there that I've never thought of before. Yeah, great stuff, man. I think that's going to help some folks.
Yeah, that's why that's why I'm doing it. There's no ego in this for me at all. I was sharing with my friend this morning that this is very uncomfortable for me. I wasn't hesitant to do it, but it's just uncomfortable. And he's like, but think of the person that you're going to help today.
Yeah.
Right. The nurse who's considering a different profession, just go do it. Stop the nonsense. Just go. It's worth it. There's a lot there's a million things you can do. You don't have to do this. And this is going back is so dangerous. Yeah. And the obstacles there are they're meant to kind of hurt you. Right. That's just the sadness of it, is as much as you might find somebody who's great in a union or the college or have a great manager, who cares? The system is meant to hurt you. It's just not safe. I remember, when you first started your Facebook group in Obsidian, you asked me to join up, and I did. And somebody in there posted, we do recover or something like that. And I was like, yeah, but you also die. And they were super mad at me for saying that. Yeah, and I was like, look, I'm not being an asshole. I'm being real. So it's okay if you're that person who can go back and you can do it, that's cool. But also, like, you could die. And one of the statistics that they do follow and that they share at Homewood is healthcare professionals, if they relapse, they have a much higher rate of death because they know how to do it and they're intentional about it.
Yeah, I've seen it in practice. I mean, I've seen it with Obsidian. I've heard the stories directly from the people. There's no two ways about it. I just think that it deserves a lot more consideration than we're giving it right now. That's all. And like you said, I mean, there's people who that is going to be the right decision. You know, they're going to be able to go back and they're going to be okay. But man, that can't be the default. I think you really have to look at it carefully.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to add just quickly, Sheldon, that I've been so excited about this episode, about having your story shared and your approach to say that there are other options. There is another way out of this. And that there's liberation, and there is choice. And you have helped me directly. And when you started coming back to Nathan's group, you added that voice to the discussion that, wait a second, there are, and Nathan has been a proponent of that as well. But you were a living example of a nurse specifically who said, you know what, no, my identity isn't attached to this. There is a way out of this. And it was a voice that I really needed to hear, and that has been inspiring for me as I've looked outside of the profession and realized that this is, you know, as all of these other doors, and I kind of waited for more doors to close to realize it. But seeing your story, hearing those lessons that you took, it did help me. So my hope is that there are other people who are seeing some of those doors close and thinking like, what do I do now? And to see that there is autonomy to be had.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, I would say if anybody goes through that and they are inspired or it changes something, like, give some feedback, right? Because this stuff's scary for someone like me to do. But if I know that I helped somebody, I'm going to be more inclined to do it again. And it's, you know, not just for me, but for other people. If this stuff's helping, then support the people that are helping you. Just with a kind word.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's hard to put yourself out there.
Let us know if you do watch on YouTube. Please leave a comment. It really helps us know what's working, what's not, and kind of keeps us on track. Or if not, just send us an email. We appreciate that too. But I think we can leave it there, gentlemen. What do you think?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thanks so much for doing this, Sheldon. You knocked it out of the park. I love it. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheldon. Thanks, Nathan.
Okay. You guys are very welcome. Thank you so much.
Next time, guys. Take care.
Thanks. See you soon.